Greetings, beloved brothers and sisters. I do hope you're well, and so we meet again to have more chats. So I'm so excited for the chat for today, for the topic for today. As you can see, my husband is not here. This is because today I am sharing the word for the day, which connects to the marriage course teachings we've been doing together. And it also relates to people that are in business, and it relates to people that are trusting God from moving into a place of the wilderness into the promised land. So the title for today's topic is Your Destiny to the Promised Land. Your Destiny to the Promised Land. So for those that are joining us for the first time, welcome family. We are so excited to have you. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, as well as share it with those that could really benefit from the ministry that we are doing. And in the season, we are focusing on marriage, but we're also focusing on those that are in the building season. We are also focusing on those that are trusting God for their next level. We are focusing on those that feel like they've been in the wilderness and now they need to birth and move to the promised land. And so our reading today, as we've been studying this month from the book of Genesis. So our reading is from Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. So now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And as some of us know that we are co-heirs in Abraham, which means the promises that God made and the promises that God made with Abraham are also our promises as well, as we are the children of God. And so as per today's topic, your destiny to the promised land. So I did a whole write-up and I've got my notes here. So if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. And so if you remember a few days back, if you haven't seen our videos, our first video is the title for our first video is What is Marriage? And then there's part 2, What is Marriage, part 2. And then we've been focusing on leave, when God commands in the book of Genesis, when God created Adam and Eve, and he said to Adam, after he had created Eve, that for this reason shall a man, leave his father and mother's house to cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And we were discussing the process of leaving, which I believe will be an entire 10-part teaching, because leaving is that deep, because it has to do with identity, it has to do with familiarity, it has to do with a whole lot of psychological things. And so we see that God created Adam, to leave his father and mother so that he can be able to cleave to his wife. And I'm not talking about the literal Adam, but I'm speaking about men. That when there's a boy child, or when you have a son, that one day he will leave you, to be married, to fulfill God's purpose and role for his life. And I'm a mother of a son too. And, even though he's very young, I still tell him that, I'm raising you, my brother. I'm raising you, my son, so that one day you learn to be so independent, of me, so that I release you into the world and you will be the best father and best husband to your wife, based on what your father and I have been able to teach you, and how we teach you to fear God. By God's grace, we trust God. I mean, like, we all teach our children, but none of us are in control with, what they become. We just do what God has called us to do, and we just leave the rest to God. But that being said, I'm already having those conversations where I'm preparing him that he's not going to be with us forever, that we are raising him so that, so that as he goes out into the world, we are preparing him for his destination and for his calling, his final calling, which is to be married. So And I know that a lot of parents don't understand this, which has created problems where parents are literally raising children for themselves. Whereas God gives us our children for the time being to raise them and then release them, you know, and we see this, you know. Even had an example. I've got a couple of examples here, so let me just read what it is that I'd written here. So my question is, why did God ask Abraham to leave his home, his hometown, his neighbors, his familiarity, his family, his comfort zone, to go to a new land? You know, and the reason why I'm asking this question is because usually when we teach on leave and cleave in marriage, a lot of you know, a lot of men that mean well find themselves stuck in not understanding what this whole thing is about, whereas it actually is something that is not just not just scriptural, but that is a calling upon God for every married man and every male child. So then why did God ask Abraham to leave his home, his hometown, his neighbors, his familiarity, his comfort zone, his family, he's a family, to go to a new land? And then I wrote, this is because Abraham's blessings and promises were not found in the land or hometown where he grew up and where he was coming from. This is because God does this strategically, that where we come from is literally the preparation ground that is to equip us, to raise us for the next level, for where we are going. And Abraham could have comfortably stayed in his hometown with his parents and family, but at the cost of his destiny and calling for greatness. Same is with us, and same is with us in marriage, you know. And when a man refuses to leave mother and father to cleave to his spouse and to follow the calling of God upon his life, this man does not only delay his blessings, but he actually trades his God-given, but he also trades his God-given destiny for comfort and familiarity. It takes faith to leave what is familiar and to step into the newness of the new land that God has for you, which is in the context of marriage, but also in the context of business, but also in the context of ministry, you know, but also in the context of whatever God is calling you to do. And as I wrote the examples here, I have written, the Lord led me to write, animals get this. When a dog mom has raised her pups, there comes a time when she needs to release them into the world. Bird moms also get this. And I just shared a story in our old home in Johannesburg. You know, I once witnessed two very small birds that had fallen from their nest. They had been stuck in their nest for a while, and then they actually fell from the nest. And they just kept walking around. So I'm just going to share the story. They kept walking around. Our dogs kept you know, barking at them, and we were trying to keep our dogs away from them, and they were so scared, but they couldn't fly. They just kept, you know, just running away fast from our dogs, and we would keep our dogs away from them. And I kept wondering, why are these birds not flying? And my husband looked at them and he said, and my question was, oh, they must have fallen from the nest, because I could see the nest. They'd been there for a while. But I was wondering, where's the mom? And I realized the mom long left them. I mean, they were there for a couple of days, eh? And my husband said, no, they're old enough to fly, you know. So I think bird mom recognized that these birds are old enough to fly, but they refuse to fly and will not fly. So she flew away so that she literally flew away so that they would find their way into the world, you know. And the reason why they had actually fallen from the nest is because now they had outgrown the nest. They were too big for the nest, and for them, they still wanted to be in this nest, but nature was telling them that no, you've outgrown this nest now. And kudos to Bird Mom, who just decided to leave so that they learn to make their way, in the world. And, they were there for about a couple of days. I would say about 7 days. But what's interesting is that they eventually flew away, and boy, did we celebrate when they had left, because we were trying to keep them alive and ensuring that, the dogs don't get to them. And just like the story of the birds, human beings can be exactly the same. Human beings can refuse to leave the nest. Our parents, sometimes our parents have done such a great job in raising us and teaching us and imparting knowledge on us and making us fear God. But there comes a time when our own wings now need to kick in, and we need to learn to fly on our own. And so, because us humans, we can be trapped in the nest even though we've outgrown the nest, even when God has instructed us and shown us that it is time for us to leave, but we still want to cleave to the nest. And sometimes I've seen that, I've witnessed and seen people that have really, really matured, that have never left their nest. And some, like with some of, as we're doing the marriage counseling that we're doing with couples, we've also witnessed that, with some husbands, they literally in the middle between leaving the nest and walking towards the promised land. And so this is the notes that I wrote, beloved brothers and sisters, God is calling for you to leave the nest today, to rise to your calling of being the head of your household and builder of your new marital home, for women, for wives. And it's very daunting to leave the nest, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave, nor that God has not called you to leave. And sometimes parents struggle with letting their kids go. And it's interesting in the Bible, within the context of marriage, as we were discussing and studying leave and cleave, what we did find is that there's nowhere in the Bible where God commands their parents to let their children go, but he does command for the husband to leave. Which means sometimes your own parents will be the ones who are afraid to let you go for some reasons. They loved you so much, and they're just not aware of the new season in your life as a newly married man, and therefore they still cleave to you, not realizing that season is over, that now you're called to leave the nest and for you to be your own head in your own home, and as we discussed, as my husband shared, that marriage is literally God's strategy from graduating sons, from being the son to headship role of husband, where now he gets to lead his family and raise sons. And it's a great promotion. It's a sacred promotion. However, when parents don't understand that, it's so easy for parents to cleave and clutch on to their children for dear life, making them to be almost trapped and stuck from being fully married and embracing the new call that God has given them. And in your season of leaving, married couples, that you are to honor your parents. You are to bless your parents, because they come from the Lord. And parents can be such a blessing upon our lives. Our relationship with our parents is so holy and so sacred that at the point at which they have raised us up, that we are to bless our parents, and we are to thank them and honor them for all their sacrifices. But we still are to leave, because we too are called to birth and raise godly generations of sons and daughters that have their full faith on nothing else and on nobody else but God. And remember, it takes faith to be married, and it takes faith to leave familiarity to become all that God has destined for us to be, but we must do it. And what a beautiful word. And whilst we're on this leave topic, and remember that when the day when we walking down the aisle, as married couples, as you know, as you're walking down the aisle to your husband, remember what takes place is that as the bride, your wife literally walks you down the aisle and releases you to your husband and gives you a way to be married. And up until that moment that, you know, you're still holding on to your father, you're still his daughter. Your father has divine authority over you. But the moment he releases you, he also releases his headship role. So everything that he was doing and he was in your life, he now hands it over to the new head, which is your husband, which means your husband is the one now that is called to lead you, to pray for you, to protect you, to cover you, to provide for you. So literally, your father is saying, this is what I did for my daughter. Now I am releasing her to you so that all the role that I fulfilled in her life, you now have to fulfill it. Same thing as mothers as well. Mothers also need to release sons that, yes, I looked after you, I nurtured you, I helped you, you know, I comforted you, you know, I put clothes on your back, and even though I have taken care of you now, I'm letting go of this helper role and matriarch role that I once fulfilled in your life, and I'm handing it over to your bride. And so parents that actually really get and understand what the shifts in marriage and the shifts and changes in identity, they literally weep at the altar because they understand that it's the final step of letting go, you know, of, oh my God, I've done all I can for this child, I've educated them, now I get to release them to be married and to go build their own life. And it's so emotional, it's so beautiful, it's so sacred, it's so holy. And so the young bride moves from just being a little girl to being the matriarch of her own house. And which means now that her first allegiance and loyalty is to her husband. Her first submission now is to her husband, whereas first she had to submit to her father. But at the altar, the exchange happens, and the changes in identities and the graduation from boy to head, from woman to matriarch and helper, you know, then it takes place, which means that if there's ever a disagreement between the husband and the father, the bride is called to submit to the husband, not to the father anymore. Yes, the bride can honor her father, but it means that now the two have to come together to cleave and become one flesh. And unfortunately, when that leaving process has not taken place well, the process of becoming one flesh becomes impossible because the families on the other side are always dragging the spouses back to their homestead. So in context of leaving. And so, however, the rules change though when your parents age and you have to look after them. You know, then you can take care of your parents, they can live with you. But remember that the process of leaving is step number one for the newly wedded couple, so that they learn to establish their own traditions, their own marriage, their own family, you know, as the Lord leads them to. And then as their parents age, then they can look after their parents, but it's always from the context of having left. And this is why this is so important, because a lot of us we're coming from families sometimes where there's a little bit of dysfunction here and there. Sometimes there's a spirit of alcoholism, sometimes, you know, there's been abuse, sometimes there's a whole lot of things that may not have pleased God, whilst there are also a lot of positive things, but there are also things where God wants to break the patterns of the old man so that the new culture of marriage can be established so that God can build a new thing between the new marriage and to ensure that the new couple is not just inheriting the same patterns of their parents, you know. And so when leaving has not happened properly, or if there are certain traumas from both sides of the family, if there are traumas from both sides of the family, we found that it becomes more difficult for the families to leave their children, because they're literally cleaving to their children. because maybe sometimes we found that sometimes fathers were not present. Like for examples, in the case of there's a newly wedded husband, in the case where his mother is afraid to let him go. We found consistently that usually in this case there's usually been non-present fathers, non-present fathers, and because the father was non-present, it's almost like the parent took that full responsibility that the father was supposed to fulfill, and handed it over to the son. And so part of our coaching as well is making mothers understand that as well as I'm a mother of a son, and I'm also teaching myself, my son is not my husband. And whatever my husband fails to fulfill, I don't pass it down to my son. That I take to the Father, and I pray and I ask God, to help me and to fill that space or that empty void, and that I'm not to take that void and pass it on to the son, and making it harder for the son to be able to leave, and which can result in a relationship where mother and son have a codependent relationship. And wow, this is so common. This is so common where fathers are not present. The relationship of codependency between mother and son is inevitable because there's a trauma in place. There's a gap that the son has had to fulfill. Same thing, it goes every other way. Yes, whilst it does need grace, it requires for healing. We've also found that in marriages where the mother and the father were so had a healthy marriage, it's still hard for them to let go of their sons, but it's easier. There's no trauma in place. There's no trauma in place. It's a case of, okay, son, you gotta go. And so I'm so passionate on the leaving process, because some of us, even though whilst I'm bringing this to marriage, but some of us also, have promises that God has for us, and God is trying to lead us to the promised land. And yet we are stuck because we refuse to leave the comfort zone. We refuse to leave the comfort zone. We still want to be at home. We still want to, be in the familiar. And because of that, we do not step out in faith into the new land to help us to build. Whether God is assigning us to build a business, whether God is assigning us to build a ministry, and faith can be daunting because, God doesn't always give us the whole plan, and all we are called to do is just to trust that the next step God has got us, but God still calls for us to step out and leave the familiarity. So why did Abraham leave his father's homestead, his mother and father? It's because his blessings were never there. That was only preparation land. And so even for us, beloved brothers and sisters, is that the comfort zone is not the promised land, and we are to honor where we come from, and we are to thank God for every person that he helped to raise us up, but that we are also to leave and move into the new land and purpose and territory that God has for us, especially when we hear his voice that he is calling us out. So bless you, beloved brothers and sisters. This is a powerful word, and I thought, let me share this word because a lot of us are so scared to leave. We've entered into a codependent relationship where we believe our parents should baby us until we be like 50, but even nature disputes that. Even in the lion kingdom, it disputes that. Even in the animal with all animals, in fact, is that they literally raise their children to release them. And so is the same way with the human race. But when we don't understand that, it's so easy for us to cleave to our daughters and our sons, when now the season has come for us to allow them to let go and to fly. So bless you, beloved brothers and sisters. Please share our channel, with those that can benefit from it. We love you so much. We are so grateful to be here and to get to teach you. So until we meet again with our next teachings on marriage, stay tuned. Cheers.